The swamp was quiet in the way only dangerous places are, too still, too heavy with silence. Thick reeds swayed gently in the humid air, and the dark water lay hidden beneath a blanket of green moss and floating weeds. It looked calm from a distance, almost peaceful, but anyone who knew the land understood the truth. The swamp was a trap, especially for those who wandered in without knowing how to get out. That was exactly what happened to the dog. She was a medium-sized stray with muddy brown fur and tired eyes, the kind of dog that had learned to survive on her own. No collar, no owner calling her name, just instinct and hunger guiding her steps. That day, the smell of something edible, perhaps a bird, perhaps a fish, lured her closer to the water's edge. One careless step was all it took. The ground beneath her paws gave way, and in an instant, she slipped into the swamp. At first, she tried to swim. Dogs are natural swimmers, after all. But this was not a clear lake or a gentle river. The water was thick and heavy, pulling at her legs. Long strands of weeds wrapped around her paws, tightening with every frantic kick. The mud below acted like quicksand, sucking her down little by little. Panic set in. She began to howl. It wasn't a normal bark or a playful sound. It was raw, desperate, filled with fear. Her voice echoed across the swamp, breaking the silence again and again. Each howl was a plea, not just for help, but for life itself. Her head barely stayed above water now, her strength fading fast. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time stretches strangely when survival is at stake. The dog's movements slowed, her howls growing weaker. The swamp, indifferent and ancient, continued to pull her down. And then, something unexpected happened. From the far side of the swamp, there was movement among the reeds. Not a human, not a rescue team, not even another dog. What emerged made the scene almost unbelievable. It was a large male deer. Tall, strong, with wide antlers rising like branches from his head, he stood at the edge of the swamp, completely still. His ears were alert, his dark eyes fixed on the struggling dog. Deer are known to be cautious, even fearful of unfamiliar sounds, especially cries of distress. Instinct usually tells them to run, to avoid danger at all costs. But this deer did not run. He stepped closer. The dog noticed him too. For a brief moment, hope flickered in her exhausted eyes, though she could not possibly know whether this creature meant safety or another threat. She let out one more weak howl, barely audible now. The deer lowered his head, as if thinking, as if weighing a choice. Then, slowly and carefully, he stepped into the shallow part of the swamp. This alone was extraordinary. Deer avoid deep water whenever possible. The swamp was unpredictable, dangerous even for an animal as strong as him. But he moved forward anyway, placing each hoof with care, testing the ground before shifting his weight. When the water reached his legs, he stopped. He could not go much farther without risking his own life. The dog was still too far away, tangled and sinking. So he did something no one would expect. The deer stretched his neck forward, extending it as far as he could. His antlers hovered above the water, just within reach of the dog. With the last of her strength, the dog lifted her head and pawed weakly at the air. She missed once, twice. On the third attempt, her paw caught on one of the antlers. The deer froze. He did not pull back. He did not panic. He stood perfectly still, muscles tense, allowing the dog to grip his antler properly. The dog, sensing her only chance, wrapped both front paws around it, clinging desperately. Very slowly, the deer stepped backward. Each step was careful, deliberate. Too fast, and the dog might lose her grip. Too slow, and she might not survive. The weeds resisted, the mud held on stubbornly, but inch by inch, the dog was pulled closer to solid ground. With a final effort, the deer gave a stronger pull, and the dog came free from the swamp's grasp. She collapsed onto the muddy bank, coughing, shivering, alive. The deer stepped back onto dry land as well, breathing heavily. For a moment, they simply stood there, two very different animals connected by a shared moment that defied logic and instinct. The dog slowly lifted her head and looked at her rescuer. There was no barking now, no fear. Just exhaustion and something that looked very much like gratitude. Her tail gave a small, weak wag. The deer looked back at her. Then, as calmly as he had arrived, he turned and disappeared into the trees, his antlers vanishing among the leaves. He did not wait for thanks. He did not look back. Later that day, a group of hikers passed by the swamp and found the dog resting near the edge. She was muddy, shaken, but alive. They gave her water, wrapped her in a jacket, and took her to a nearby animal shelter. The staff were amazed she had survived at all. When the hikers told the story of what they believed they saw, a deer helping a drowning dog, many smiled politely, unsure whether to believe it. But the dog knew. Over the following weeks, she recovered fully. Her strength returned, her eyes brightened, and her fear faded. Eventually, she was adopted by a family who gave her a warm home, regular meals, and a name of her own. She never went near swamps again, but sometimes, during quiet walks in nature, she would stop and stare into the trees, ears perked, as if remembering something important. Stories like this challenge the way we think about the natural world. We often assume animals operate only on instinct: eat, survive, avoid danger. But moments like these suggest something more. Compassion, awareness, a choice. The deer had nothing to gain from helping the dog. No reward, no safety, no benefit. In fact, he risked his own life. And yet, when faced with another creature in distress, he acted. Perhaps kindness is more universal than we think. In a world where bad news travels fast and hope often feels scarce, this story reminds us that empathy can appear in the most unexpected forms, in the most unlikely places. Sometimes, salvation comes not from those we expect, but from those who simply choose to care. The swamp remained the same, dark, quiet, dangerous. But for one dog, it became the place where she learned that even in the deepest trouble, help can come from a direction you would never imagine. And for those who hear her story, it becomes a gentle reminder: never underestimate the power of compassion, and never assume you know who might be your hero. After the deer disappeared into the trees, the swamp slowly returned to its earlier stillness, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The reeds swayed again, insects buzzed softly, and the dark water hid its secrets beneath the floating green surface. But for the dog lying on the muddy bank, nothing would ever feel the same again. Her body trembled uncontrollably. Cold swamp water dripped from her fur, forming small puddles beneath her chest. Each breath came in short, uneven bursts as her lungs worked to recover from the panic and exhaustion. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed again, too weak to move. Still, she was alive, and somewhere deep inside her, she seemed to understand how close she had come to disappearing forever. Minutes passed, then more. The sun climbed higher, burning away the early mist that hovered above the swamp. The dog rested her head on the ground, eyes half closed, drifting in and out of awareness. Every now and then, a sound from the forest would make her ears twitch. Perhaps part of her hoped the deer would return. Perhaps another part simply wanted to be sure the miracle had truly happened. By midday, footsteps echoed along a narrow trail nearby. A group of hikers had decided to explore the edge of the wetland, drawn by curiosity and the promise of scenic views. They were laughing, talking quietly, unaware that just hours earlier, a life had nearly been lost there. One of them noticed movement near the water and stopped abruptly. "Wait," she said, pointing. "There's a dog." They approached carefully, unsure whether the animal was injured or aggressive. But the dog didn't growl or bark. She barely lifted her head, eyes dull with exhaustion. Mud clung to her fur, and weeds were tangled around her legs like evidence of a battle she had barely survived. The hikers immediately realized something was wrong. They offered her water first, holding the bottle close enough for her to drink without standing. She lapped weakly, each sip restoring a little strength. One of them gently wrapped a jacket around her to keep her warm. Another examined her legs, checking for cuts or broken bones. Miraculously, there were none, just deep scratches and swelling from the struggle. As they waited with her, one hiker glanced toward the swamp and frowned. "It looks dangerous out there," he said. "How did she even get out?" That was when the woman who had first spotted the dog spoke hesitantly. "This might sound strange," she began, "but when we were still far back on the trail, I swear I saw a deer near the water. And it looked like it was pulling something." The others exchanged uncertain looks. Someone chuckled nervously. Someone else shrugged. It sounded impossible, almost silly. And yet, there was the dog, alive, pulled free from a place that should have claimed her. They decided not to argue about it. Instead, they carried the dog carefully to their vehicle and drove her to the nearest animal shelter. The staff there were experienced, having seen animals rescued from fires, floods, and accidents of all kinds. But even they were surprised by the condition the dog was in, and by how lucky she was. "She shouldn't have survived that," one of the veterinarians said quietly while examining her. "Swamps don't let go easily." The dog spent the first few days sleeping. Her body, finally safe, demanded rest. She barely reacted to the sounds around her, waking only to eat and drink. The shelter workers spoke softly to her, cleaned her wounds, and made sure she felt no threat. Slowly, very slowly, she began to trust again. As her strength returned, her personality emerged. She was gentle, cautious, and unusually calm. Loud noises startled her, and water, especially dark or still water, made her freeze in place. But she was affectionate, pressing her head into the hands of anyone who showed her kindness, as if she understood how fragile life could be. One of the shelter volunteers noticed something unusual during walks. Whenever they passed near a wooded area, the dog would stop and stare into the trees. She didn't bark or pull at the leash. She simply watched, still and focused, tail low but wagging just slightly. It was as if she was searching for someone. Weeks passed, and the story of the swamp dog spread quietly among the shelter staff and volunteers. Some repeated the hikers' account with skepticism, others with wonder. A few admitted that they believed it completely. After all, nature had surprised them before. Then one afternoon, a family came to the shelter looking to adopt. They weren't searching for a specific breed or age. They just wanted a dog who needed a home. When they met her, sitting quietly in the corner of her kennel, something clicked instantly. She stood up, walked toward them, and gently rested her head against the child's knee. That was it. The adoption process didn't take long. The dog left the shelter with a new leash, a new collar, and a new beginning. She was given a name, one that meant, saved, in the family's language, though they didn't know how perfectly it fit. Life with her new family was unlike anything she had known before. There was warmth, regular meals, soft places to sleep, and hands that never struck her. At first, she was cautious, always alert, always ready to retreat. But as days turned into weeks, her fear faded. Still, some memories never left. During family walks in parks or countryside paths, she would avoid muddy ground and shallow ponds. If forced too close, she would stop, body stiff, eyes wide. The family learned to respect this, guiding her gently away, never pushing her into fear. And sometimes, very rarely, when the light filtered just right through the trees and the forest grew quiet, she would stop and look deep into the woods, ears lifting, nose twitching. In those moments, it was as if she remembered the presence that had once stepped out of the wild to save her. Far away from the warmth of human homes, the deer continued his life as he always had. He roamed the forest, fed on leaves and grass, avoided predators, followed the rhythms of the seasons. To him, the rescue may not have felt heroic or extraordinary. Perhaps it was just a response to a sound that did not belong, a cry that triggered something deeper than fear. Animals do not tell stories. They do not seek praise or recognition. But they remember. And somewhere in that forest, whenever the wind carried strange sounds from the swamp, the deer would lift his head and listen. Maybe he never knew what became of the dog. Maybe he didn't need to. The moment had passed, and life moved on. Yet the impact of that moment rippled outward. For the hikers, it became a story they would tell again and again, each time with more conviction. For the shelter workers, it reinforced their belief that hope could appear even in the darkest circumstances. For the family, it was a reminder that the dog they loved had survived something incredible. And for those who hear the story, it serves as a quiet challenge. We often believe kindness belongs only to humans, that compassion requires words, rules, or morals. But sometimes, it appears without language, without reason, born simply from awareness of another's suffering. In a world that often feels divided and harsh, this story stands as proof that empathy can cross boundaries we assume are fixed. Species, instinct, fear. One life noticed another life in danger, and chose to act. The swamp remains dangerous. The forest remains wild. But somewhere between mud and antlers, between desperation and courage, a truth revealed itself. Even in nature's most unforgiving places, mercy can exist. And sometimes, the one who saves you is the last one you would ever expect.